This is a gaming computer I built with a few goals in mind. Goal number 1, I had to build a compact PC that can fit into any setup. Goal number 2, the build had to fit into a $500 budget, no more, not even 1 cent. The third and final goal, it's actually more of a restraint. I have to use the new RTX 5060 because it's new and I want to try it out. This black box is the result of those 3 goals. Not bad, and it actually performs surprisingly well, as long as your expectations aren't through the roof. I'm talking 60 plus FPS in AAA story mode games and anywhere from 100 to 200 plus FPS in your favorite esports titles. It's not the most well-rounded build, but I'll go over all the parts I used, share some of my own insight, and we'll check out the 1080p gaming performance. And maybe this little thing can even handle 4K gaming with a bit of help. Now when it comes to building a budget PC, you need to look for good deals to get the most value for your money. For this build, I scored a CPU and motherboard combo on eBay. The motherboard that came with the deal is the Asus TUF B450 Gaming Plus. It supports a bunch of different CPUs from the AM4 socket. Now it wasn't in the best condition. There was thermal paste on the CPU and it was a bit dusty, but no big deal. A quick blow from an electric air duster cleaned it up. It also didn't come with the IO shield or cooler backplate, but the IO shield doesn't really matter, and I had an extra backplate on hand. Wiping the old thermal paste off to reveal the CPU, we can see a Ryzen 5 3600. This used to be one of the most sought after CPUs for a budget gaming PC, but now people tend to want the newer 5000 series of processors, like the Ryzen 5 5500 or 5600, but the 3600 is still plenty capable if you get it for the right price. Has 6 cores and 12 threads, which is all you really need for 1080p gaming and basic productivity tasks. Now, as I mentioned, the other CPUs, like the 5500, definitely buy that option if you can't find the 3600 for a good price. There are a few differences like Gen 3 versus Gen 4 support and half the L3 cache, but despite that, it's built on a newer architecture, so in games, performance is actually pretty close, and the 5500 actually beats the 3600 in most games. I'd only recommend going with the 3600 if it's cheaper than the Ryzen 5 5500, and that CPU can usually be found brand new on Amazon for around $50 to $70, depending on current sales at the time. After taxes, this combo cost me $71.78. If you look at the cost of a new CPU and motherboard right now, it would be well over $100. I will gladly buy used as it will work perfectly for our needs and it will save some money in our wallet. And another way you can do that is to not buy a Windows key from Microsoft. Instead, visit our sponsor Super CDK with the links below. They sell discounted Microsoft products and you can grab yourself a Windows 11 Pro CD key and use the discount code SPLA to get it for a fraction of the price of a retail key. Now this won't get the feds called on you, but it will activate Windows for cheap. All you do is copy the key from your orders page, paste it into the window activation settings, follow the steps, and bam, you saved money while activating Windows. Thank you Super CDK, check them out with the links below, and while you're down there, maybe drop a like. Alright, back to the build. We need to install some RAM. Unfortunately, with the production of DDR4 coming to an end, that impacts the budget builds. The cost has gone up. Luckily, I managed to buy this Corsair kit for $31.49. It's 32 gigabytes clocked at 3200 megahertz, and we will still have 2 open RAM slots on the motherboard, so we could upgrade to 64 gigabytes if we really wanted to. For storage, I went with a simple 1TB M.2 SSD. I bought it brand new since the price difference between new and used isn't that big, and I wanted to get it quickly. The model really doesn't matter all too much, just buy the largest and fastest capacity that you can afford. We need a cooler for the CPU. I'm using a $5 budget banger. Well, $5.75. It was only that price because I bought 30 of them on a sale. It's the AIGO ICE 400 SE, and normally it's around $8 to $13, but the metal is cheap. It's lightweight, the fan is static RGB. On top of that, I always add zip ties to reinforce the mounting clips because the metal will break off. Sometimes they already come broken in shipping, so really, I would recommend you buy something else on Amazon, but I guess it does the job of cooling the CPU. Moving on to the case, we have one less step since we don't have an IO shield. Big win right there, saved myself like 5 seconds. I went with a Zalman Cubics. I actually built in the white version recently, and it's a solid case. It gets a pass from me. It's a super slim micro ATX chassis that can fit both mini ITX and micro ATX motherboards, plus full-size ATX power supplies. For this build, I installed a 500 watt bronze power supply because this setup doesn't draw that much juice. The CPU is rated for 65 watts and the GPU is only rated for 145 watts. Now sure, under load, they will pull a bit more power, but we will be rock solid. The exact GPU I went with is a Gigabyte RTX 5060. I bought this at my local Micro Center on an open box discount. The MSRP of this card is $299 and I secured it for $258.56 after taxes. That's not a bad price for the card, and it's really how much it should have been at MSRP, but beggars can't be choosers. However, it will work perfectly for our build since it's pretty slim design and only takes one 8-pin for power. But here it is, the build is all done. My camera ended up dying, but I did time the build. I was able to get it under 20 minutes, and I must say, I love the look of this little thing, man. Powerful little black box. My total cost for all the parts came in slightly under the $500 budget, so another win right there. And the deals that I bought definitely helped bring that total cost down. Before we check out the gaming performance, I did a few things apart from installing Windows and updating GPU drivers. Since the motherboard was used, I made sure to update the BIOS, and good thing I did. The version it came with was from 2019, so it was pretty outdated. That alone will hinder the performance. I made sure to get it updated to the most recent version, and I also enabled the RAM XMP. At a minimum, that's what I recommend you do for basically any computer before you start gaming. Speaking of, in Cyberpunk 2077, it did pretty great. Now, it wasn't running at native 4K ultra settings, but it was using ray tracing and the visuals looked awesome. This was at native 1080p, no DLSS or upscaling, but it was using medium ray tracing like I said, and everything else was set to high. For a story mode game, even under 60 FPS is acceptable, depending on who you ask. But as long as it's smooth and looks great, I'm happy. This would definitely work for me. Now, it did have some drops. The 1% low was 41. But that's why I recommend actually using frame gen at the very least. I didn't use upscaling because 1080p is already a softer resolution, but the difference in performance is definitely worth enabling frame generation. It made the image a bit softer, but the average FPS was now way past 60, around 164 to 180, and previously in intense situations it would dip below 60 FPS without frame gen enabled, while now that it is enabled, it held pretty steady and the dips weren't as bad. In Marvel Rivals, in my testing, the average FPS was well above 100, even 200, which is ideal for a fast-paced game like this. The 1% lows were quite bad at 55, at least that's what was reported in the MSI Afterburner, but it really didn't feel super choppy. I played on high settings with DLSS set to balanced. I also took advantage of DLSS 4 frame generation, which is only available on the 40 and 50 series NVIDIA GPUs. That's a plus for the budget RTX 5060, but an obvious drawback being the fact that it has 8 GB of VRAM. Leave a comment below what GPU you have in your system, or maybe a GPU you want to upgrade to. I'm curious. I loaded up Call of Duty Black Ops 6. This is another fast-paced game. I went in with high textures, everything else set to low, DLSS set to balanced, and of course DLSS frame gen was enabled. Without it, the average FPS was 93, and with it enabled, we averaged 189 FPS, although the 1% low was pretty rough like we saw in Marvel Rivals, but it wasn't a complete slideshow. The performance without frame gen was noticeably worse. Now in Red Dead Redemption 2, all the settings were at ultra or high and DLSS was set to balance. This game looks great even at 1080p. I mean, look at this explosion, the light rays, the shadows, and all the other details. Great looking game, and it performed great with an average FPS staying above 60. For a lighter game, I tested CS2, actually my first time, and on this computer, I ran it with all low settings to maximize frames. The average FPS was 273. If you played on all high settings, the average FPS does drop pretty significantly, around 183, so sticking with low settings will give you that competitive advantage. But hey, if you're not great at the game, it really doesn't matter, just use whatever settings you want. Now in Fortnite, can't forget this game, and I say this every time, but man, this game was way easier to run before they did all the crazy graphic upgrades and made the switch to Unreal Engine 5. Now most of the time it's full of stutters, but it's still playable, you know, with low settings. I tested a couple of different configurations, and the footage you're watching right now is full screen, DirectX 12, anti-aliasing set to TAA, 100% 3D res scale, and all the other settings were on low. I also tested in window full screen, and performance was about a 1 frame difference, at least in my testing. Either way, the average FPS will be around 153 with 1% low of 95. I was also curious if DLSS would give us any extra performance over TAA, and it sure did. The increase was very slight, but it improved by about 4%, and the 1% lows were slightly better, so that always helps. I switched over to performance mode with all the same settings as before, so all low, but the options for DLSS and TAA go away when you switch over to performance mode. I kept a 3D resolution scale at 100% to make sure the pixels didn't completely vanish, and honestly, I wasn't that impressed. Yeah, our average FPS was better, closer to the 200 range, but the 1% lows were worse, and on top of that, game looks bad. This is where spending more money on a Ryzen 5 5500 would grant more performance, but that goes for all the other games that I tested as well. I'm actually pretty happy with this build. It looked super sleek, it wasn't that difficult to build, it was affordable, and the best part, it performs great for the money that I spent, and if this was my actual personal computer, I would be really happy with it because it does what I need to without breaking the bank. Now I know this computer isn't the best build part for part. One of the huge drawbacks is the motherboard. It's B450, so it's only Gen 3, and on top of that, an obvious drawback again being the GPU with 8 GB of VRAM. But let's not complain too much. Earlier I briefly mentioned 4K gaming, and yes, it can play 4K Cyberpunk. We do have to use upscaling. I set DLSS to quality, and DLSS frame gen is a must. I also dropped the crowd density to low, but I still used high settings, and ray tracing was on with RT lighting at medium. The game looks super crispy on this 32-inch OLED, and the average FPS was 61, and it plays way better without ray tracing, but overall, I'm impressed with this thing, man. It's all thanks to frame gen, but hey, pretty awesome. Goes to show you don't need to spend a ton of money. Check out all the parts linked below if you want to build something similar, or I'm also selling this one for profit if you don't want to build it. Anyways, that's it for me. Smash like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.